I just found out my wife cheated on me with her boss, and now she's claiming half our $500, $0 house and $200, $0 in savings. I never suspected she'd be such a skilled manipulator, or that it would end with a bitter legal battle over money and property. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife turned out to be a complete manipulative bitch. Honestly, I thought we had a solid life. 2 kids, a nice house, decent jobs, and a future that seemed pretty predictable. But then one day, everything fell apart in a way I never saw coming. It started with little things, her phone always face down, quick glances when she thought I wasn't looking, and a strange edge in her voice when she was on the phone. I figured she was just stressed with work, or maybe hiding something she didn't want me to see. Little did I know, I was about to find out she was screwing her boss, Mark. It all came crashing down when I was cleaning out the garage. I'd taken a day off because I wasn't feeling great, and I decided to finally organize some of the boxes stored there. As I rummaged through a box of old tools and papers, I found a receipt, nothing special, just a restaurant bill. But what caught my eye was the date. The night claimed she was working late. That was weird, but I brushed it off. Then I noticed the name on the receipt, Mark's Steakhouse. That's when my stomach dropped. I remembered mentioning she had to work late that night, but now I had hard proof she'd lied. I couldn't believe it. How long had this been going on? I started digging through her emails and texts on her phone when she was asleep. That's when I saw the messages, flirty, suggestive, and downright disgusting. They'd been texting for months, talking about secret meetings, planning dinners, sharing jokes about me. I saw pictures, 2 photos of her in her office, in her car, even in bed with Mark. That's when I realized it wasn't just a fling. It was something serious, something she was hiding from me while pretending everything was fine. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My stomach twisted, my head spun. I couldn't believe she'd been lying right to my face all this time. The worst part, she'd been so convincing, so charming when she lied. She'd turn on the tears, accuse me of being paranoid, call me insecure for suspecting anything. She's always been the bitchy type, quick to call me insecure when I questioned her, but now I saw her true colors. She's manipulative, selfish, and willing to destroy our marriage for some affair with her boss. That night I confronted her. I was furious, trembling with anger, but I kept my voice steady. I showed her the receipts, the texts, the photos. Her face went pale, and for a second I thought she'd deny everything, but she just looked at me, eyes cold. Then she started lying, saying it was innocent, just some work-related fun, that she never meant for me to find out, and that Mark was just a friend who she had a professional relationship with. She called me insecure and jealous, accused me of not trusting her, even said I was overreacting. That was her typical defense, blame me, call me crazy, spin her lies, but I wasn't buying it anymore. The emotional hit me hard. First, shock, how could she do this? Then anger, how dare she betray me after all these years? And then deep sadness, knowing everything was about to change forever. I looked at her, this woman I'd trusted, and realized I didn't even recognize her anymore. She turned into someone I couldn't stand. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and honestly broken. I kept replaying the moment I found out, the look in her eyes as she lied and spun her stories. It was like I'd been hit by a freight train and I didn't know how I was going to pick up the pieces. I spent the following days trying to process it all. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I didn't see that she'd been cheating on me with her boss for months. I was furious at her, but also at myself for not noticing sooner. I started questioning everything, our marriage, her love, my own judgment. I felt so damn stupid for trusting her blindly. I knew I had to decide what to do next, but right now, I was just trying to survive the pain, trying to hold myself together as everything I believed in crumbled around me. After that confrontation, everything changed. Kept insisting it was just a fling, that Mark was just some guy she'd hooked up with a handful of times, nothing serious. She'd cry, call me insecure, say I was overreacting because I didn't understand how stressful her job was. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I saw through her lies, her manipulations. I knew she'd be trying to spin this to her advantage, to make me look like the bad guy. That's why I decided I needed to get serious about understanding what I was really dealing with. Over the next few days, I started digging into her finances and her phone more thoroughly. I had to know if she'd been hiding anything else, if Mark was just a side thing or part of something bigger. That's when I discovered she'd been funneling money into a secret bank account, an account I didn't know about, with almost $50, $0 in it. I found bank statements, online banking login info, and it was clear she'd been planning this affair for months. She'd been sneaking around, lying about her whereabouts, and saving money for her new life with Mark. It stung to realize she'd been deceitful on so many levels. I also noticed that she'd been making arrangements, buying tickets, booking hotels, even talking about moving out. She'd been planning her escape and I was just catching up. That realization made my blood boil. She'd been so good at hiding her tracks I'd never suspected a thing. Meanwhile, I was left feeling like a fool, betrayed not just emotionally but financially too. The house, our shared investment, was worth $500,000 and she was claiming half of it in the divorce. She said she deserved a cut because she was entitled to her share of the savings and property, even though she'd been unfaithful and manipulative from day one. In the days that followed, I started to think about what I should do. I was angry, yes, but also hurt. I didn't want to just let her walk away with everything, especially after she'd betrayed me so badly. I knew I had to fight for what was rightfully mine. I also knew I couldn't just go into a legal battle blindly. That's when I started talking to a lawyer, trying to understand my options. She claimed she'd sue for half our assets, and honestly, I was just trying to keep my head straight. I had to prepare myself for the storm ahead. Meanwhile, stayed in the house for a while longer, throwing tantrums and trying to guilt me into letting her keep everything. She'd call me selfish, accuse me of ruining her life, and say she deserves a fair share because she'd sacrificed so much for our family. But I saw right through her. She's always been the type to manipulate her way out of trouble, and I knew she'd try to spin this as a victim story. The more she pushed, the more determined I became to stand my ground. I realized I couldn't let her manipulate me into giving her what she wanted just because she was crying and acting helpless. One thing that really hit me hard was how she lied about her relationship with Mark. She insisted they'd only had sex a couple of times, that it was nothing serious, and that she'd stopped seeing him weeks ago. But I found messages, long, explicit conversations, plans to meet up again, and even photos of her in bed with him. She lied to my face, and that was the moment I knew. She was a master manipulator. She's good at hiding her true intentions, at convincing people she's innocent while she's secretly plotting her escape. That realization made me more determined to protect myself and my assets. I also started to reflect on my own feelings. Part of me was just devastated, disillusioned, really. I had trusted her. I had built a life with her. And now I was faced with the reality that she'd been screwing her boss behind my back, lying to my face for months. The betrayal cut deep, but I knew I had to be strong. I couldn't let her see how much she'd hurt me. I had to get everything in order, legal, financial, emotional, because I knew this was just the beginning of a long, bitter fight. The worst part, knowing that she'd probably manipulate the situation to her advantage, to take as much as she could and leave me holding the pieces. But I also knew I wouldn't go down without a fight. I'd figure out a way to come out of this with some dignity intact, even if it meant tearing her world apart first. Once I had all the evidence in hand and a good understanding of what might try to do, I knew I had to act fast. I wasn't about to let her steamroll me into giving her half of everything just because she threw a tantrum and played the victim. I contacted a lawyer, someone who specialized in divorce and asset division, and laid out everything I'd uncovered. The lawyer told me I had a strong case, especially since I had proof of her affair, secret bank account, and her plans to leave. Still, I knew the legal process would be messy and wasn't going to go down without a fight. I remember sitting in my living room one night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My mind kept racing over the betrayal, the lies, the financial sneaking around. I kept thinking about how she'd lied about her affair being nothing, how she'd claimed she was just stressed and overwhelmed at work. but I saw through her bullshit now. She's always been the type to manipulate her way out of trouble. She's good at spinning stories, at crying and acting helpless, but I knew the truth. She'd been planning this for months, and now she was trying to take everything I'd worked for. The house, the savings, our future. It all felt like it was slipping away. She was claiming she deserved a fair share because she'd contributed to the house, even though her contribution was mostly her lies and betrayal. She kept insisting she was entitled to her half, even though she'd been screwing her boss, lying to my face, and secretly saving money for her new life. I told her she was full of shit, but she just kept crying, calling me a terrible person, saying I was trying to punish her. That's when I realized how good she was at twisting things around. She's a master manipulator, and I was just another pawn in her game. In the meantime, I started to gather everything I needed for the legal fight. I made copies of bank statements, texts, emails, photos, anything that proved her infidelity and her plans to leave. I also hired a private investigator to see if she was talking to Mark or anyone else behind my back. Turns out she was. I found out she'd been meeting Mark at a hotel, having sex, and planning her escape. That was the final straw. I knew I couldn't just sit back and let her walk away with everything, especially after she betrayed me so thoroughly. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. How could she do this? How could she lie and manipulate her way through our marriage, pretend everything was fine, and then turn around and try to take everything I had? It was like she was trying to erase the years we'd spent together, all the sacrifices I'd made. I felt sick thinking about how she'd been screwing her boss, lying about it, and then claiming she was the victim. That's when I decided I'd fight her every step of the way. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into giving her a dime more than what was fair. One thing that really stuck with me was how she kept trying to deny everything. Every time I brought up the affair, she'd say I was crazy, paranoid, or that I was just jealous. She'd call me controlling, insecure, and say I was trying to ruin her reputation. But I knew better. I had the proof. I knew she'd been lying the entire time. Still, she'd look at me with those cold, bitchy eyes and act like the victim. That pissed me off even more. She's good at spinning her stories, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Now I'm at a point where I have to decide what's next. I've told her I want a divorce, and I'm prepared to fight for my fair share. I don't want her to walk away with a single cent of what she's claiming unless it's legally ours. I'm aware she's probably going to try to manipulate the situation, maybe even threaten me or sue for more than she deserves. But I'm ready. I've got the evidence, I've got the lawyer, and I'm prepared to stand my ground. Honestly, I don't even care what she says anymore. The betrayal cut deep, but I refuse to let her win by taking everything I worked so hard for. This isn't just about the money, it's about standing up to her lies and manipulations. I want her to know I'm not going down without a fight, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine. The legal battle started sooner than I expected. True to her manipulative nature, didn't back down easily. She threw everything she could at me: accusations, tears, guilt trips. She claimed she was the victim of my paranoia and trust issues, even though I had concrete proof of her affair and her secret bank account. She insisted she deserved half the house, half the savings, because she contributed to everything, even though the only thing she'd really contributed lately was lies and betrayal. The first court hearing was a nightmare. Showed up in her most bitchy, manipulative form, crying fake tears, acting helpless, and trying to paint herself as the wronged wife. She said she was devastated, that she was just trying to save her marriage, and that I was trying to ruin her life. I sat there, feeling like I was in some twisted soap opera, knowing full well she'd been screwing her boss, planning her escape, and lying to my face for months. My lawyer was sharp, though, and made sure to present all the evidence. The texts, the bank statements, the photos, they all painted a clear picture. During the hearing, kept trying to spin her lies. She claimed her affair was just a mistake, that Mark was just a friend, and that she never wanted to hurt me. She said she was confused, that she'd been under a lot of stress, and that I was just jealous. Her voice was bitchy, her tone dismissive, like she thought she could manipulate the judge just like she manipulated me. I could see right through her. I knew she was trying to turn the situation around to make herself look innocent, but the judge saw through it too. Meanwhile, I stayed calm, sticking to the facts. I explained how she had been sneaking around, lying about her whereabouts and saving money for her new life. I told the court about the secret bank account, the hotel meetings with Mark, and her plans to leave. I laid out everything, hoping the judge would see her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd been screwing her boss and trying to take everything I had. I knew I had a legal case, but I also knew she was good at twisting things, so I had to be prepared for her next move. She tried to claim she deserved a bigger share of the house because she contributed to the mortgage and upkeep. She argued that her work stress was a reason she'd been acting out, and that her affair with Mark was just a mistake. I couldn't believe the audacity. She was trying to justify her betrayal as some kind of mistake, like it was just a moment of weakness, not a months-long affair with her boss. I wanted to scream at her, but I kept my composure. I knew this wasn't over and I had to stay sharp. The judge, however, seemed to see through her lies. He asked tough questions, looked at the evidence, and listened carefully. At one point he looked at and said, "Mrs. Johnson, are you aware that the evidence clearly shows you've been having an affair with your boss and hiding a separate bank account?" She hesitated, then tried to deny it, but it was obvious she was caught. The court wasn't buying her excuses. I felt a small sense of relief, but I knew the fight was far from over. After the hearing, stormed out, calling me a monster, a jealous bastard, and warning that she'd fight me to the end. She threatened to sue for half the house, claiming she'd been contributing all along, even though she'd been screwing her boss and lying about everything. I just watched her leave, feeling a mixture of anger and frustration. I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation, but I also knew I had a good case. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a long, bitter war. In the days that followed, I focused on gathering even more evidence and preparing for what I knew would be a tough legal battle. I met with my lawyer regularly, making sure every document was in order. I also started talking to a financial advisor to understand exactly what I'd be fighting for, how much of the house I could keep, what I was entitled to, and how to protect my savings from her manipulations. I was angry, yes, but I also knew I had to stay smart. Was good at twisting things, and I couldn't let her manipulate her way into getting more than she deserved. At the same time, I was trying to process everything emotionally. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I trusted her for so long, and now I saw her for what she really was, a selfish, manipulative woman who'd do anything to get what she wanted. The hardest part was realizing how much I'd been blind. All those signs, her secretive phone, the late nights, the strange behavior, were right there, but I'd ignored them because I loved her. Now I just felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. Still, I knew I had to keep going to fight for my rights and to protect what's mine. I wasn't going to let her walk away with my house, my savings, or my dignity, not after everything she'd done. The legal process dragged on and didn't make it easy. She hired her own lawyer, and suddenly the fight was no longer just about the house or the savings. It became a full-blown war of manipulation and dirty tactics. She started claiming I was abusive, that I was controlling, even that I'd hit her, things that weren't true but sounded convincing enough because she was crying and playing the victim. She knew how to spin it, how to make everyone think she was innocent, even while her texts with Mark kept popping up everywhere. I knew I had to stay one step ahead. I kept documenting everything, her lies, her calls, her attempts at manipulation. I hired a private investigator again, just to keep tabs on her, especially since I suspected she might try to hide more money or assets. Turns out, she was still talking to Mark, planning her escape, even trying to set up a new life without me. I found out she'd been secretly transferring money to offshore accounts, trying to hide her assets. That was a real wake-up call. I couldn't trust her to play fair, and I had to be prepared for her to do whatever it took to win. Meanwhile, the court hearings became more intense. The lawyer argued that she deserved a larger share because she'd contributed to the house's upkeep, and because she'd suffered during the marriage, her words, not mine. She claimed I was abusive, that I'd been controlling, and that I'd been emotionally manipulating her. Honestly, it made me sick to hear her spin her lies like that. I was just trying to protect my rights, but she was twisting everything to make herself look like the victim. I kept my cool, but inside I was furious. The judge, however, was not buying her bullshit. He saw through her tears and her manipulations. He asked tough questions, looked at the evidence, and made it clear that her claims of abuse were unsubstantiated. That was a small victory, but I knew wouldn't give up easily. She'd try every trick in the book to get what she wanted. She even started spreading rumors among the neighbors and friends, claiming I was violent and unreasonable, just to turn people against me. That was her way to manipulate, to lie, to win at any cost. One of the most shocking moments came during a deposition when she was asked directly about her affair with Mark. She hesitated, then finally admitted to it but downplayed it, saying it was just sex, nothing serious, and that she'd ended it weeks ago. But I had the texts, the photos, and the hotel receipts, proof she'd been lying. That was a pivotal moment because it confirmed everything I'd suspected. The judge looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and skepticism. I could see he wasn't buying her story anymore. Throughout this entire ordeal, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Relief because I was finally getting the truth out there, and I knew I had solid evidence. Exhaustion because this process was draining me emotionally and physically. Every day felt like a battle, and I was fighting not just for my assets but for my dignity. I kept thinking about how I'd manipulated her way into this mess, how she'd lied, cheated, and schemed her way through our marriage. And I wondered how I ever trusted her in the first place. At this point, I'd made the decision. I was going to fight for my rights no matter what. I wasn't about to let her take half the house, half the savings, or anything else she was claiming. I knew she'd try to drag this out to wear me down, but I was prepared. I'd come this far and I wasn't going to back down now. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions, and I wanted to protect what was mine. The house, the savings, the future I'd worked so hard for, none of it was going to slip away because she was a manipulative, selfish woman. I'd make sure of that. The final court date was one of the most draining days of my life. Showed up looking like she had rehearsed her tears, her voice trembling, trying to act like everything was just a misunderstanding. She kept insisting that she deserved more, that her contributions, whatever she thought they were, outweighed the betrayal. She called me a monster, accused me of ruining her life, and tried to paint herself as the victim of my controlling behavior. But I had all the evidence, texts, bank statements, hotel receipts, photos, and I made sure to present every piece with clarity. The judge listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and finally made his ruling. He awarded me the house, the majority of the savings, and ordered to pay her share of the legal costs. The court saw through her manipulations and her lies. She was furious, screaming at the judge, calling him biased, but it didn't matter. The truth was out, and I finally had the justice I'd been fighting for. Stormed out of the courtroom, her face twisted with rage, and I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The nightmare was over, but the scars remained. In the weeks that followed, I moved out of the house. It was strange to leave the home we built together, but I knew it was the right decision. I found a small apartment nearby, enough to start over. I took the house's sale proceeds and used them to pay off some debts, secure my future, and make sure I could rebuild everything from scratch. I also cut all ties with no more calls, no more messages. I realized that trust, once broken, can never truly be restored, and I was better off without her. Looking back now, I see how much I've learned. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the people you least expect. I learned to be more cautious, more aware of the signs I'd ignored. I also learned that no matter how manipulative someone is, the truth will always come out if you're willing to fight for it. I wish I could say I'm completely healed, but I'm not. I still feel the sting of betrayal every now and then. Still, I'm stronger now, more aware of what I deserve, and I know I'll never let myself be like that again. To anyone going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs of betrayal, even if they seem small at first. Document everything. Get a good lawyer. And don't let anyone manipulate you into giving up what's rightfully yours. You're worth more than that. I've learned that the hard way, but I'm living proof that you can come out on the other side, battered but victorious. And someday, I hope to find peace again, knowing I fought for myself and won.